it's hard to talk about because I don't have the same perspective now that I had when I was younger. You know, I was younger, like the world was a less open place.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a, you know, a little town where like I didn't know anybody who was openly gay.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't like role models and things on TV and the media. There was stereotypes, you know, things that you couldn't relate to as someone trying to figure out your sexuality as a teenager. And you're just like, I'm not that and I'm not that. Like, I don't know what. So back then, I think I was more aware of it and people weren't as open. I mean, that was the time where, you know, everybody was using derogatory terms
Openly.
for everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it was just everything bad was gay. And, you know, people would call everybody like, you know, the F word.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's just, that was sort of normal language. And I mean, you get that. Like, people aren't necessarily terrible homophobic people using
Mm-hmm.
that language.
It was just normalized.
But yeah, back then that's what you did. So earlier, you know, in my life of coming to terms with my own sexuality and just like figuring out what that meant, it was worse. You know, it was hard. But like now, you know, people are so much more open. You know, it's easy to find sort of normal examples of someone, you know, in the media being portrayed that I was like, oh yeah, I relate with that. I'm gay, but like I'm not a certain kind of gay or like I don't know, like a stereotype. Like I'm just a person.
You're your
And
own individual, right?
it's just part of who I am. It doesn't define me. You know, people don't always know, I guess, how you think of it yourself. And it was hard, I think 20s more, where I think rollerblading had a little bit of a, like, I feel silly like using, what word to use, like hypermasculine thing.
Well,
where-
had a point to prove.
yeah,
I
because
think.
skateboarding tried to tear it down, and their main fight was, man, rollerblading's so gay.
Yeah.
Like, look at those stupid fruit booters. Like,
Right.
that was their big thing against us. And you had all these, you know, teenagers, early 20, like, guys trying to be like,
No, we're not.
yeah. So for me, you know, I'm like, well, I guess I am, but like, I'm not, and I got to fit in. So you learn how to like tailor your language to the people around you. Like, you know, I would not, if I was, you know, going on a date or like whatever, you just like, use really like generic terminology when you're talking to your friends, because you just don't know who is okay with it, who's open. You're always kind of judging your surroundings and unfortunately judging people based on it, because it, you know, somebody who is calling things gay and saying derogatory things, like whether or not they mean it, I'm going to be like, oh, well, maybe they wouldn't be that open to it. Is it really worth my trouble? Like, you have the opportunity to come out all the time. I mean, just in any random circumstance where I'm sort of potentially put on the spot, where it's like, you know, even earlier talking where it's like, you know, I met my boyfriend somewhere. Like,
Right.
I could
Just like bringing that up casually, that you have to be aware of who you're.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's certainly not as bad as it used to be. And there's a lot of people that just say, you know, just who cares? Just be yourself and don't worry about it. But, you know, my entire sort of figuring out that part of my identity was caring and was being aware of the world around me and the bad things that were happening to people who were open about it. I mean, you know, I couldn't even get married until like 2015.
Yeah.
So you kind of want to adopt that, don't care, I'll just be myself. But, you know,
It's always in the back of your head kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been yelled at, you know, walking down the street holding hands with a man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, people yelling me out of the car. Like, it hasn't happened in a long time, but it's still, those things stick with you whether or not it was serious. And, you know that there's a lot worse things going on in the world, and I certainly don't. Like this, I feel like it's about my experience, not something political or like bigger, because there's all sorts of other terrible things happening to other people. But the skating part, it made it hard at first, because it was like all these guys have this thing to prove, and they're like gay this, gay that, like and it made it hard to be myself for a while. And then, you know, you just get to a point, like skating also helped too. Like it gave me something to be part of. It gave me something to be confident about. Like I think it sounds funny, but like the girl pants trend, like that sort of gave me a reason to be able to care about my appearance. Like I always kind of tried to avoid those things where like,
were you doing the sweatpants before that?
I just
you didn't do that, you skipped that?
I had one pair of sweatpants.
Good for you. Good for you. We all
one of the few.
We all look back in our past like, oh my god, I wish I could have redone that section dressed normally.
I mean, I also did the remember the super oversized undershirt thing,
Oversized
like,
undershirt.
the sleeves.
Yeah.
I did that.
Okay.
And big pants too, but there was some of that.
So
where
you have some shame with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely didn't have
Some healthy shame.
a little of that was trying to avoid, the stereotypical "this is what makes you gay," caring
Right.
about your appearance, sort of being well put together kind of thing. Where it's well, I don't want anybody to guess, so you're hyper aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas nobody would think that,
Mm-hmm.
but in your mind it's all built up, and it's all this kind of turmoil of things. I remember, coming the first time I came out to somebody, I was so scared and nervous.
Ever?
And,
How old are you?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious.
the 18 or 19.
18, 19.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't mind if I ask candidly, because I'm genuinely
No.
curious. But did you know from an early age, or?
I knew something was different. I knew that the things my friends were talking about and were interested in, sort of sexually and girls and things, I was I don't quite get it. The way they'd say things or look at girls and women, I was I don't know. I'm not quite sure I know what you're talking about, but not having any example, I'd sort of be I guess that's what I like too, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of, you try to fit in, and then, it got more apparent to me that I was this just isn't what I'm interested in. And as I grew up and sort of experienced more life, it's oh,
Yeah.
this makes sense now. So I think a point I guess I like to make in conversations sometimes, it's people, ask, or people act like it's choice somehow. It's when did you choose to be straight?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever remember making a conscious choice?
Right,
It's
yeah.
that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
But it's more how you express it. And if you're in a place of, people that are open and comfortable, I mean, my mom was incredibly supportive. I've had supportive people around me since I started coming out. I mean, and beforehand too, where it made it comfortable enough to talk to people and be hey, this is just part of my life, and I don't want to hide it anymore. And I don't want to feel because you kind of feel the people you care about, you're letting down a little bit. It puts you in this, I'm lying to you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's oh,
You
well,
feel guilty about it, maybe?
yeah, where'd you go last night? Really? Oh, I had a date. It's you're just oh,
You're just hanging out with a friend or something.
yeah. And it's you're lying to your friends, and then also you're downplaying maybe a romantic interest in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fair to that person either.
Yeah.
So it's just
It's
a
tough-
journey of it. And then, people you don't know that well, it goes, unfortunately, it felt you're making judgments where I'm is this person worth it to me? What interactions are we going to have? Do I need to worry about it? Because if you just turn it off and are yeah, I just won't right now.
Yeah.
You just kind of let it go. But then you're thinking of people and you're oh man, but I like that person. They were nice. I want to be open about my life.
Yeah. It kind of something in the way, between if you don't talk about it, not
Yeah.
in the barrier, because you're not exposing who you are to.
Yeah,
your,
and you don't give
friend.
them that opportunity. It's
Yeah.
not fair of me to take the opportunity for you to be a nice person away.
Yeah.
Just assuming, hey, this guy's gonna be a dick if I say something. But
You used to second guess yourself a lot. Do you still feel that way at all?
yeah, I mean, it happened way less. I mean, I think I've stopped, I guess, feeling I should apologize for it in some way. It's not that I
You
think
used
I
to
should,
apologize for it.
not that I'm gay, but just that I don't know, that I'm not being open about it or something. I felt that was sort of bad not to be open. But now I'm just this is me. This is my
But you're not
life.
entitled to hi, I'm Grant, and this is,
Well, right, that's the thing either. I don't want it to be the defining factor of I'd be oh, there's Grant, that gay rollerblader guy. That's not the defining part of my person, but it's important to just
Yeah.
any straight person, it's your normal life. You don't think twice about talking about your girlfriend or
Mm-hmm.
mentioning, somebody a hot woman walking down the street or just experiences you've had that are heterosexual that are just normal.
Right.
It's nothing you hide. It's nothing. It's all around us all the time for you guys.
Yeah.
I was telling, I forgot, maybe a couple people, just because it felt funny to me that it still hit me. I went to San Francisco recently, and getting off the plane, Delta had ads that had obviously gay young men And I was just like in sort of normal, like it wasn't campy or stereotypical. It was just, I was like, I haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
Like I've seen, stuff on TV now is way more
Yeah.
open,
The conversation's being had more the past few years.
but it was just a simple, like little billboard thing.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, that's what it feels like. Just for a second, I was like, that's what it feels like for everyone else, just to see all these things they relate to all the time. Like, and
it probably felt cool.
Yeah, it did.
I never thought about it that way.
Because that's what you see, a billboard is a man and a woman, or like
Right,
I don't know,
yeah.
just stuff where
When you see a commercial, it's like the typical family. It's like the man,
You
the
just
woman,
feel
the
outside
kid,
of
whatever.
it all.
you're always exactly. And so that was a recent thing. We're just like, oh, cool. And then
cool.
I moved on, but obviously not, because I still thought of it. But like, I think that was a way I thought of as like relating it to other people that maybe didn't have that experience. Like your world's all around you when you're sort of not other, I guess.
Yeah.
And lots of people have the experience like I do for other reasons, but even just, no matter your like race or whatever, like being straight, I think is something you not necessarily take for granted, but it's just your world is around you.
No,
And
I know what you're saying, and I think I know what you're saying, and like how you were trying to explain like how you're gay, but it doesn't define like everything who you are. Like it's not like when I'm walking down, it's like, oh, that's that straight guy. Like it's just kind of you take it for granted. People like associate you with other things, and then if you're gay, like that might be like the main thing they associate with you versus like all these other things that make up who you are. Is
Right.
that kind of what you're saying?
yeah, in a way. I had like notes too that I was
Well, also you were just talking about how scared you were to come out for the first time, and I kind of interrupted you by asking.
yeah. Well, I was
you.
just saying, like, part of the problem I think for me is like you build it up.
Mhm.
Something you're nervous about, something you're worried about, regardless of what it is. You build it up way high, and then sometimes the actual outcome is just kind of whatever. Like I remember the first time I came out, it was just sort of like, oh, cool. And it's like a
you
little
built
bit.
it up more than like.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you trust someone to tell them, then
Obviously,
they're
yeah,
probably
yeah.
going to.
Right.
Your
Be
judgment's probably
accepted.
going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
on
trying
who
to
you-
actually remember right. It was a skating friend. It was either like my friend Kevin or Mike, like Mike Torres, like,
Mhm.
and I can't remember which like came first. Like it was like kind of close together kind of thing.
Mhm.
And yeah, there was just sort of like, oh yeah, cool. Like
It's like, okay, so what
thanks
now?
for telling me kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Mike being just super supportive and like, I mean it's Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
So, but
Has
Yeah.
has like the rest of like blading community, I guess, like people that you run into when you travel, like feel the same way now, or?
I mean it doesn't come up that often.
Mhm.
I guess I generally, in my mind, I try to just assume people know.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like I've been open about
I'll be
it.
real. I didn't
Yeah.
know until like just like not too long ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
so-
also I think that's the reality, because for a lot of people,
Yeah.
like, it doesn't really matter.
No,
You
it
know, it's
doesn't.
not something that you're like a news bulletin.
Right,
For. It's
right.
like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just this person that happens to be part of their life.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's 2019. Like it's people are so much more open with it. I feel like at least in the bigger cities and places, like everyone has friends who or knows of
Yeah.
or interacts, works like
Yeah, because I think that there was a time where it was easier to not know someone.
yeah
To either you did and they were hiding it, or you just didn't.
yeah.
So just, I mean, but yeah, you're in New York and it's a bigger place. And
Yeah, I'm sure it's different in other places where you are, but
Well, yeah, even in New York, I'm sure people don't. They have people that aren't. But I'm just saying, I think it's more, like you said, like
people are more open.
It's more. It's a different time where the conversation's being had more, and people are, at least hopefully, feeling more comfortable with.
yeah.
It seems like that.
Yeah,
It definitely is.
And we're all getting older and more mature.
Right.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
that's another thing too. When you're a kid, it's like kind of like part of the bullying thing, maybe. And like he said,
Yeah.
people use
Yeah.
against a derogatory term, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're gay," whatever, this and that.
Well, kids are assholes.
Yeah,
Like,
oh, it's exactly what
by
it is.
nature, like,
exactly what it
generally.
is. When you're older, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and that, I mean that. I guess the point of sort of the rollerblading thing, like is just, I don't know, be careful with your words. That there are always people listening
Yeah.
and kind of paying attention to their environment. And I think since Tim Adams posted a big thing coming out a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, and
Yeah.
I think that opened up a lot of conversation for people.
Mhm.
And Tim's a really, really great guy. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't like Tim, then
Yeah, exactly.
you're
Yeah.
the jerk.
Yeah.
Like,
And other people sort of get wind of that, and I've talked to people over the years that are just like, hey, me too, thanks, like, can we share experience kind of thing. And
Mhm.
they're starting to certainly a lot more openly gay rollerbladers that I know now than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're advertising it, like it's like you sort of feel like I'm not advertising it,
Yeah.
but I'm also not gonna hide it either.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in this case where it's kind of, this is bringing me back a little bit to like being like nervous about it, just because it's a wider audience, and not necessarily because I think people are going to be jerks. It's just like it sticks with you.
Yeah.
But you were saying like it's you're open about it now anyway. Like you don't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
Doing something like this shouldn't really be any different, I guess.
Well, I certainly think it takes courage to sit and candidly talk about it in a platform where people are going to have their opinions and say things.
Yeah.
But I also think that I think it's important for you to have wanted to talk about it, and because it's going to embolden someone who may have felt the way that you felt, like where you were like, I don't feel like I can talk to it. I don't see anyone I can relate to.
Right.
And for like those people like who are like, oh well, okay, it's cool. Like and maybe I can. So yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely some of the hope of just, don't have to be a role model, but like, yeah, you said if somebody feels a little more comfortable with themselves, that's really awesome.